Jitsuma, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank, thank you so much for making time to see us. It's a wonderful honor for me to be in your digital presence. You've been an inspiration for so long, and I wanted for my Dharma friends to have an opportunity to know you and to be inspired by you and benefit from your wisdom and experience. I think I should not say too much. Uh, Jetsuma Tenzin Palmo is very well known, very well
Yes.
recognized. She's one of the foremost teachers in the Western world, even though she resides in North India. She's been a nun for many, many years, one of the first, I think the second woman to be ordained. And she has not only dedicated her life to Dharma, to serving the tradition, the guru, but also took upon herself this great responsibility of establishing a nunnery and looking for the well-being and the education of many Himalayan women. And I've had the fortune to visit briefly 15 years ago. And
Oh,
it's a
it's
wonderful,
changed.
oh, it's a wonderful project, very, very inspiring. And I first listened to Jitsuma in Bodh Gaya many years ago, giving a commentary on His Holiness Dalai Lama's teaching, and everybody in that room was awed. Everybody was so inspired by her direct and frank commentary. And since then, whenever I could, if she happened to be on tour in New York or wherever I was, I tried to be in the audience. So I'm very happy that we have this opportunity to 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 receive from her all her experience and blessings. So this will be in the format of an interview. So I'll try to speak the least amount as possible. And the topic we have for us today is Sangha in general, and also the possibility of taking up a monastic or ordination. So we have some Dharma friends
Get
that
that
are.
louder.
Yes, I'll try to speak a little bit
No,
louder.
it's all right. We can. I'm a little bit deaf.
So we have some very new Dharma friends that are being introduced to the theory and the practice of Dharma, and also some Dharma friends that are now more experienced and are seriously considering taking up monastic ordination. So the first question, maybe more broadly speaking, how can we better value and understand the importance of Sangha? We take refuge in the three jewels, but often we forget one of them.
Well, of course, first of all, when we talk about Sangha, what do we mean? I mean, the Buddha himself talked often about the fourfold Sangha. That is the monastic Sangha, both fully ordained monks, fully ordained nuns, and laymen, lay women. In other words, all followers of the Dharma are part of the Sangha. And the Buddha said that when the fourfold Sangha studies and practices and propagates the Dharma, everybody, not just monks, everybody, if they're all really absorbed in practicing and studying and teaching Dharma, then the Dharma can be said to flourish. And that this is a middle country, meaning a Dharma country. He said the fourfold Sangha was like a table with four legs, which would stand very strong. So first of all, we have to remember that is, when we talk about Sangha, we don't just, basically in taking refuge, to my mind, we're taking refuge not just in that Sangha, but also in the Arya Sangha, in the noble Sangha of all those who have actually had a direct experience of the true nature of the mind. And that has nothing to do with our gender or whether we're monastic or lay. But when we come to talking in traditional terms, especially in Asia, when they talk about Sangha, they are thinking specifically of monastic Sangha and actually specifically monks. But now that is changing and nuns are also rising. I think to my mind, what the importance of the monastic Sangha is, first of all, they exemplify renunciation. After all, they have given up, a professional life. They've given up relationships, close relationships, family, children, and many of the comforts of an ordinary life. They have said, that's not what I want. And their focus of their life should be, at least, and usually is, the Dharma. Studying, practicing, accomplishing, and in some cases, propagating the Dharma. I mean, they're the professionals, put it that way, because they have to, everything is handed to them, provided that they just study and practice and share what they have understood. So, just as you can be a musician, a very, very talented amateur musician, but a professional, it's the center of their life. Nothing else it matters to them, really, apart from being able to be the master of their instrument. And so, by rights, a well-ordered Sangha is that of people who have, through their application to study and practice, have realized the Dharma in their whole life should be an exemplary to renunciation, contentment with little, the realization that so many of the things which nowadays, especially, people put at the center of their lives, profession, possessions, relationships, sex, social engagements, partying, and watching television and movies and entertainments and all the things which most people spend so much of their time and energy on. It's not there. They are not doing any of that. And by rights, they should be perfectly happy not doing any of that. I mean, when we look at our nuns, they're such a jolly lot, and they don't have any of the things which a girl who was going to college would have. They're not talking about boys. They're not talking about Bollywood actors. They're not talking about their hair or, what they're wearing and what's fashionable and what isn't fashionable. All of those things which take up so much time and so much of our thought and feeling process. It just dropped away. And the fact that the things which most people think are the most important, for them are the least important, to my mind, is worthy of respect. Because, they have given up so much, but they don't look like they're miserable because they've given it up. They feel so much lighter for putting all their energy into studying and practicing Dharma, rather than all the frivolous worldly activities which could otherwise take over their lives.
Very good. And what should be the correct or the most appropriate, the most helpful motivation for those seeking ordination?
I think that their motivation should be that if done correctly, the monastic life is the fast track to realization, because you're giving all your energy in that direction and it's not being siphoned off into other, nothing against lay life, but it is more difficult. It is more distractions. There is no doubt. There really is. You can do it. And many great lamas were also married with a family, but then they had servants to do all the other stuff. And they weren't going out to work in the office. They were actually at, either in retreat or teaching and whatever. So it's a little, just to say that, lamas were married they didn't have the same kind of lifestyle that people in the West, when they get married, have to, mortgages, children, sending them to schools, taking care of, familial relationships and so forth. It's a lot of stress, which a monastic life, at least it doesn't have that stress, right? It might have other stresses, but not that one. And you can give your energies focused on what is, from a Dharma point of view, what really matters.
Very good.
So that should be the motivation, that this is going to enable me to really gain understanding and realization of the Dharma so that I can be of benefit to others. And I haven't wasted this lifetime.
That's wonderful. When I was thinking about ordination, I thought it would be helpful to interview many monks and nuns the most I could, just to learn from them, what worked for them, what obstacles they had. And also some people that were considering being a monk or nun. And it was surprising that you get the sense sometimes that they are running away from something. They're not so much going towards the Dharma, but trying to avoid a problem in their life. And that's a shadow you cannot avoid, right? It keeps following you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, in the Christian church, they talk about a vocation. They feel it's a calling. God is calling them. You're not running away from something. You're fulfilling your ultimate potential as a spiritual person. And I think that is true in one way in the Dharma too, that we are called to it. There's nothing else you can do, because nothing else has any attraction. Nothing else has any interest. The only thing which is really, really meaningful is to devote oneself totally to the Dharma. And then what else can you do? It's not should I, shouldn't I, but I have to.
Very good. And for those people that are seriously considering it, at what point is it viable? At what level should you be relating with Dharma, with your practice, so that you have the best chance of succeeding in being a monk or nun?
You have the best chance of what?
Or in other words, what level of maturity do you have to have with Dharma, theory and practice, so that you can take on ordination?
Well, of course, you know very well, Lamala, that it's a very different situation for Westerners than it is for the Himalayan and Tibetan people. I mean, we have some of our little nuns are 3 years old. Nobody was asking if they were mature or if this was really their life's calling. They were put there by their parents. I mean, they're extremely happy. They think they're in the Pure Land. But nonetheless, they weren't, you couldn't say that this was a mature decision on their part, right? So one of the main differences between, the Asian approach, you could say, and the Western approach is that most people in Asia, and certainly in the Tibetan tradition, enter into the monasteries when they are very young. So in that way, sometimes they wanted to be nuns. I mean, or when girls come to us, not the 3-year-olds, but by the time they're 10 or 12, and we say, why do you want to be a nun? And they say, I've always wanted to be a nun. And I like being with nuns. One of them said, when I'm with nuns, I feel happy. So I want to be a nun to make others happy. So fair enough. The thing is that then as young people, they are like soft clay, which can be molded. I mean, it can be molded into the shape it's meant to be in. And so in many ways, it's so much easier because they grow up just being inside the training without even realize they're being trained. And that whole mindset, is there from a very early age for them. But Westerners, of course, we don't come into the Dharma when we're that young. And it's, so many people come in quite mature years even, right? So
Yes.
all of them have been well educated. And in addition, they've mostly had relationships. Many have been married. Some have had children. They've had professions and skills. So by the time they decide they want to enter the monastic life, they're already like clay which is set, right?
Yes.
Then it's very difficult to mold. You know, and this is always the problem which faces Westerners, because they're simply used to being individuals and doing things their own way and having their own space and following their own desires, basically. And when they come to the monastic life, it's difficult unless they live alone, in which case they're not a Sangha, right?
To live in harmony in a community is
It's
challenging.
very difficult. You know, I mean, the other thing with Himalayan girls is they're used to living in a community. You know, their village and their joint family situation, they're used to living with others and acceding to others and living together. Whether you like someone, you don't, you all get along because that's you're all part of the same community. And so when they come to a nunnery or a monastery, they fit right in. You know, they feel at home. Once they settle down, then this is their home. These are their sisters and their aunties, and they feel very cozy. And they know how to, you know, those above you respect, those below you help, and the ones around you are all your friends. And so for them, it's a very natural expression of life. But for Westerners, this normally is not how it works. And they are very challenged when they all have to live together under a common rule. And everybody thinks that they know how the rule should be, even if they just got ordained last week. And it's the challenges are different.
Yes.
The challenges are different everywhere. And so we need to look not so much, to my mind, Lamala, we need to look not so much at Himalayan nunneries and monasteries, but at successful Western monasteries and nunneries. Why did they succeed when others did not? What are they doing right for Westerners?
Very good. And in that context, for Westerners, and in general, I guess for monastics, what role does the teacher play, or what type of relationship one should have with a mentor before becoming monastic?
Well, it seems to me, especially in monasteries which have been set up in the West, that the ones which succeeded are those which had strong leadership. So far, I'm not saying that's the only paradigm, but that's the one that so far seems to have succeeded most. For example, Plum Village, in which everyone followed Thich Nhat Hanh. And he had very clear views and very his own ideas very much on how things should be done and how things should be trained, and how the monastics and the lay community should live together, but with separation, right? The rules and the conduct for lay people and for monastics. And he had very clear views. I mean, his views are fine, nothing against his views, but they're his views. And if you wanted to live there, you followed his training, right? He didn't allow for people to live there long term and do their own thing, right? Everybody did it the way they were doing it. So they were all walking together on the path. Another successful, it seems to be very successful Tibetan style is that of Shravasti Abbey, run by Tibetan children. So she, again, she had previously been involved with a number of efforts to start nunneries in the West, in France and in India, and none of them worked. You know, the nuns just didn't cohere together. And so I think she learned by her mistakes and their mistakes until she finally decided how she wanted it done, which is basically based on Lamdre, and not Lamdre, on Lamrim. On the Lamrim and on Vinaya, very strict Vinaya. And so again, it seems to be a very harmonious community. The people I've met who are part of that really love being there, but it's done in accordance with how Tibetan children wants it done. And if you follow that line, then you will be very, very happy and very, very fulfilled. If you don't, you just won't fit in and you will be asked to leave. So the other monastic settlement that I know about is Amaravati, which is a Thai forest tradition. And again, you follow the Thai forest tradition, which is very much based also on Vinaya. The main problem there is it's very patriarchal. And the nuns are not happy because they're so disregarded, even though they're highly educated women, many of them with BAs and MAs, but still they're treated like they're servant girls, really. I mean, they're never considered compared with the monks, which is hard for modern women. So yeah, I mean, those are the ones I know of, which have been going for some time and seem to fulfill their purpose. People feel happy to be there. So, but all of them had strong leadership, you see, this is the point. All of them followed a certain tradition, and the tradition was laid down, and this is what you do. And if you don't like it, then you don't stay.
And in this context of women and ordination, it seems that the tradition for full ordination of women was not introduced in Tibet. So what are the options for women today to receive full ordination?
Well, I mean, one option, of course, and the option that up to now we have taken if we wanted full ordination was to go to the Chinese tradition. After the Buddha, some centuries after the Buddha, there were 18 different Shravaka schools. And then now that has winnowed down to 3. The Sthaviravada or Theravada school in Southeast Asia, Thailand, Burma, Sri Lanka, etc. The Dharmagupta school, which was introduced into China and from there spread to Korea and Vietnam. And then the Mulasavastivada of Tibet. And as you say, unfortunately, Guru Rinpoche forgot to invite any nuns, or should I say, not Guru Rinpoche so much, but his brother-in-law.
Yes.
And so because they didn't invite any nuns, therefore the nuns' ordination was not taken into Tibet. So for the last 30 years or more, they've been researching it. And so haven't come to. Basically, the question is either yes, we wrote a book about it called The Revival of the Bhikshuni, which is both in English and in Tibetan.
Very good.
His Holiness the Dalai Lama asked us to create a committee for the revival of the Bhikshuni vow. So then some various Western nuns who were very, very learned in Vinaya, collected together their views. Basically, either you can have a double ordination. According to the Vinaya, you're supposed to have a double ordination. First, you get ordained from nuns. They get ordained first by at least 5 senior nuns, bhikshunis. Then after that, within 24 hours, by a Sangha of bhikshus. So there's a double platform. Now, in the Mulasavasavada right now, we can't do that because we don't have a quorum of fully ordained nuns in the Mulasavasavada tradition. So the other option would be to be ordained only by the monks. The Buddha himself said, "Oh monks, in the absence of bhikshunis, I allow you to ordain for you to ordain the nuns." So that is also a valid ordination. But, you know, always there are certain things. I mean, the more you go into it, the more little things come up. And I'm afraid the Tibetans expect every I to be dotted, every T to be crossed, even though they themselves did not do that when they were re-establishing their ordination lineage. They made big compromises. But we are not allowed to compromise anything. So for that reason, there's been a lot of delay. It will happen, but it has to happen. Also, the nuns themselves have to want it. My feeling, Lamala, is that this has been going on now for 20, 30 years. 20, 30 years ago, the nuns were not ready. They were not educated.
Yes.
They lived in very poor nunneries. Many looked like cowsheds. They had very little confidence. If they had been ordained at that time, it would have been very, very difficult for them to have studied Vinaya and kept all the various sojong and all these other practices which they would be expected to do. They would not have been able to do it. Then the monks would have said, "You see, we said they were useless. You know, look, they can't even manage it." Now it's not true. Now these nuns are highly educated. They've been studying 20 years or more. They've become geshe. Some have become kenmos. Even in our nunnery, most of the teachers of philosophy are nuns who have now graduated. And so they now have perfect confidence in being it. They would be able to read the Vinaya, understand the Vinaya, study it, and keep it. And so now is the time. Now is the time for them to step forward and say, okay, academically, we have attained our goal. The next step is to take full ordination. Why are we still novices?
Yes. The first time it came to my awareness was when somebody asked His Holiness Goma Trishan Rinpoche in Vancouver, in Canada, about Dharma being established in the West long term. How could it flourish? How could it be stable? And he said exactly what you said. You know, that all depends on the 4 sanghas being established. And so if we care about the Dharma, we have to care about all the sanghas and culture and how do you say, facilitate and support, you know, all these communities. And how can we better relate the lay community with the monastic community, which seems not to have a very good relationship in the West, or at least some older monks that took ordination in the 80s, and then this robe said, you know, I was totally alone. I was not being helped at all. It was so difficult. I thought it just couldn't happen. So
that's
how should lay
it?
People relate to monastics?
Yeah, that's it. That's it, really, Lamala. It's very lonely trip in the West. I mean, I have also a number of friends, nuns, who were nuns 15, 20 years. Then they finally gave up because there's no Sangha. And, you know, you're not a lay person, and yet there's no nuns, you know, other nuns apart from you. And even if you're running a Dharma center, it's all for lay people. So while the lay people may be very, very sincere and really studying and practicing and exemplary, they're not monks, they're not nuns. So they don't know the challenges which come from being a monastic. And there you are all by yourself. On the one hand, everybody expects you to be an arahat. And on the other hand, they expect you just to hang out like everybody else. And what's the difference? So it's, you know, you're neither fish nor fowl, as we say. You don't belong anywhere. And so a lot of people give up because of that, because they just, what's the point? You know, I'll carry on studying and practicing, but I won't look different. I'll look like everybody else and just mix in and do my own thing. So it's a challenge to really get something that I don't know, that feeds the monastic life, that makes it healthy and fulfilling. You know, that the monastic life should be a fulfillment. So you don't want anything else because it's so wonderful. And that's what they don't feel. They just feel alienated and not appreciated for what they're trying to do and the different kind of life they're trying to lead.
So from the lay practitioner's perspective, they should do everything possible to contribute to that, no? To
you know, if a big lama comes, or even an ordinary monk comes from Tibet, you know, from a Tibetan thing, everybody's running around taking care. They don't expect him to do all these things. You know, they think he's a monk and he's something really special, you know, and he's from Tibet, you know. And but if you're a Westerner, and even if you're very much more learned than that monk, who might have been a kitchen monk for, you know, and, you know, you really have renounced a lot, which most Tibetan monks, frankly, haven't renounced much of anything, right? You know, they often come from very poor family backgrounds, and becoming a monk is actually a step upwards in their comfort level. But for Westerners, they've given up a lot. They could have done all sorts of things. Many of them have very interesting backgrounds, professional backgrounds. But it's not appreciated because you're not romantic. You're not exotic. You're not, you know, something, oh, wow, you know, sort of special. I mean, every monk is treated like they're the Dalai Lama. But then, frankly, unfortunately, not the Dalai Lama. But, you know, for a Westerner, it's very different. The whole approach is very different. I have a Dharma sister who is Australian. And she was teaching, she was living in Australia, and she was teaching meditation at a Dharma center. And so twice a week, she'd go all the way across from Sydney, or, you know, take her an hour or more to get to the Dharma center, give the meditation teaching, then go all the way back again. She did this for months. And finally, the lady, the person running the center said, you know, we're so grateful to you for all the teaching you've given us and how you know, you've really helped us on the Dharma path. So we have collected money and we have $2,000 here. And on your behalf, we are offering them to Kopan Nunnery in Nepal. And she had nothing. You know, she was, you know, living extremely poorly. But it didn't occur to, if she had been a Tibetan nun, they would have handed it to her. Because she was a Western nun, they assumed that, of course, somehow or other, she had magical sources. Just like the Tibetans think that all Westerners are wealthy, right?
yes.
So that lack of appreciation that she is a nun and who is taking care of her. You know, it's just, oh, we give it to the Tibetans, right? But the Kopan nunnery is very wealthy. It doesn't need $2,000. It would have made a big, huge difference to her.
Yes, that's a wonderful point. And so there's a culture clash at many levels. Can you share some of your personal anecdotes of your first experiences with Tibetans or as a nun in India?
Well, you know, I mean, of course, part of the reason was just being a nun in those days when nuns were not really taught or educated. So, you know, there was that side of it, you know, that they didn't feel, you know, one needed to be particularly trained or taught because, you know, you're just a nun anyway. But I think one of the problems for the Tibetans is that when they came out as refugees. And they really were, when they first came out, extremely poor. I mean, they really were. Everything was left behind. And in those days, also high or low, you know, everybody was much like, you know, in the minestrone soup. They were all the vegetables thrown together and cooked up because high lama or peasant, you were all the same. Everybody was caught in the same thing. And so anybody who wasn't a Tibetan refugee appeared like
taking
was a
resources,
jindak,
no?
you know, it looked like they were wealthy, you know, and so every time you wanted something, you would go and ask one of these nice Westerners and they would provide it for you, right? They were there, and because they had endless sources of wealth and we didn't have anything. So they would give and give and give. And that entered into the Tibetan mentality very much, that Westerners don't ever need anything because they somehow have, you know, the god of wealth it's holding them up. But the Tibetans are always in need. And if you want anything, you go and you ask one of these Westerners. So that attitude was always there. I mean, even when I went to India, and of course I had no money. I was just, you know, I'd given up my job, gone to India. And I eventually got someone, they were giving me 90 rupees a month, right? And so I was living on 90 rupees a month. And gradually the Tibetans were getting sponsors and people were, you know, really giving a lot of money to the Tibetan refugees. But it never occurred to them to help, or any of the Western nuns that came at that time, or monks. None of us ever were given, you know, 1 rupee. And also that sense that, you know, you were there to help them much less than they were there to help you. So that attitude has sort of stayed with them. You know, in fact, when I met this lovely Lama in Tibet, he said, I have to confess that when I first met Westerners, even Western nuns, my first thought was sponsors. And he said, now I realize that often these people are more poor than we are, and I feel so ashamed. But he said that's our mentality, is that if they're not Tibetans, then they are going to be donors, right? Because also when people go to India or Nepal, they save up all their money. Chinese and everyone does the same thing, Koreans. They save all their money up to buy gifts and make offerings to the lamas. So the lamas don't realize that back home, they're living on the edge, these people. You know, it's just their enormous generosity, which they never mention, that they're only living, you know, 8 people in one room. They wouldn't mention that, you know. So this is what makes a difficulty, is this lack of appreciation of the background of these people, because when they come, they are not working, right? They are not doing any of the things which they would do when they go back home. So it looks like, and they're giving all this money to all the monasteries and all the lamas. It looks like they're just nothing to do in their life except, you know, have a great time. And, you know, this gives a very distorted view of what life is like in the West also.
Very good. And these days we seem to have an additional challenge, which is how to develop or maintain a community online. Many of our Dharma friends are across different continents. So, any suggestions about that? How to keep this heart connection, even though we're not physically living in the same geographic space?
Well, I think Zoom has been amazing, really. I mean, during this time of lockdown when people could not travel, and then suddenly they discovered Zoom and all these other kind of online, YouTubes and everything. And the Lama's giving so much teaching online nowadays. And so in that way, it's been a fantastic tool. Without it, people would really have been isolated as far as Dharma is concerned.
Yes.
But it's brought everybody together. They don't have to go out of their sitting room. And there they are in the presence of some of the great lamas, right? So, it could be worse. I think if you have a team of people who are regularly on Zoom, then it would be helpful to have a progression of teaching. Maybe everybody's studying a certain text together and meditating together and even chanting together and giving people the sense of a community, even though it's an online community, because they get to know each other, right? They
Yes.
look at all those little squares and, they get to know. And it also gives the people an opportunity to ask questions, of someone like yourself that, normally they would never have someone to ask. Now they do, they have a real authority to ask. And this is also very, very helpful for people. I find that people have endless questions, and a lot of it are not the kind of questions you would read about in books.
Very good. And another interesting thing is that, for example, in the Thai tradition, they have temporary ordination, which we don't have in the Tibetan tradition. So, what is your advice for people that want to test or to try out if monastic life is for them? What temporary vows they should adopt silently, or how their lifestyle should change, or what they should do to help that.
Well, I think in Gampo Abbey in Canada, they were giving temporary ordination. Maybe in Sameling
Yes,
too. I'm just
I heard,
remembering
yes.
now that there's all these different places. And giving temporary ordination, because people really don't know. They don't have the example of the Sangha which you have in Asia. And so, I would say if you really want to do temporary ordination, either you can do it privately, in which case just do it. Like some people say, well, I want to be a monk, but maybe I have a problem with the vow of celibacy. So I say, well, take it for a short time, say, right, I'm going to from now for 6 months or a year or whatever, work on your mind, because it's important that the mind is celibate, not merely the body, and see how you get on. And if it feels comfortable and doable, then you can extend it and so forth. Not take lifelong vows and then next thing you know, you've broken them. So I think this idea of a temporary ordination, maybe not one day or 1 week, but a few months or a year or 2 years is a good thing, because people don't feel pressured. They don't feel ashamed when they give back their vows. They feel, okay, I gave that. I learned a lot from that. I learned about myself. I learned about the discipline of how it is to be a monk. I've really gained a lot from that. I don't actually want to do that for the rest of my life, but I'm really happy that I did it. And then they can give back their vows and feel okay. They did that. That's what they promised. They fulfilled their promise, and they don't feel that sense of letdown, that somehow they failed.
And what other advice, apart from this trial of adopting a set of vows for a period, what other advice for Westerners to consider becoming more interested in patrimoksha, in the vows themselves, including more lay vows, but also in monasticism?
Well, your mentioning of the pratimoksha is interesting because, as I'm sure you know, in the Tibetan tradition, it's the last thing anybody studies, right? You can have been a monk 20 years and finally you study Vinaya and maybe discover you're not a monk anymore. Because many of them don't really even know the basic Vinaya, you know, the four downfalls.
Yes.
They think it's all about women, which it isn't.
Yes.
And so I think it is very good to study Vinaya at the beginning.
Yes. At the
You
beginning.
know, and also the Tibetans have this idea that you can't study the Vinaya, the level of Vinaya, until you have taken the vows, right? And
after you take them, they tell you what you took. Yes.
then when you've taken the vows, they tell you, it's like when you take wongs, your empowerments, you take the empowerment, then they tell you what the commitments are. They don't tell you the commitments in order for you to decide whether you really want to take this wrong or not. Yes. It's a strange way of doing things personally. I think it's a mistake. I think that first they should study the Vinaya. Of nuns, for example, they take the Shramanarika Getsu rules. Then they're supposed to have 2 years of what's called the Shikshamana or Gelopma rules, in which you just keep 8 precepts. Then you take the full precepts. And certainly in China nowadays, and Buddhism is big in China nowadays. And I mean, like
mainland China is growing.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's this wonderful nunnery where we visited several times, which has 1,000 nuns.
Oh, wonderful.
And very strong Vinaya. But what they do is that when they have that middle part where they keep what is called the Shikshamana rules, that time they study the Bhikshuni Vinaya.
Oh, that's perfect, yes.
Then they take the rules and they take the vows properly, but they know then what they're taking, right? So right from the start, they know what they're committing themselves to. And that makes much more sense, that, you know, you should study the Pratimoksha. And it also helps, even lay people should study Pratimoksha, because it helps them to appreciate what the monastic life and the rules, which, I mean, not that everyone keeps all the rules, but, you know, the main rules they do keep. And, you know, it helps to appreciate, you know, also the life of a monastic, especially at the time of the Buddha.
Very good.
You know, why is it? It's not a secret, right? It's not some higher tantra. I mean, it's Vinaya, it's rules of conduct. So, you know, you should study. And in the Theravadan countries, when you take temporary ordination, one of the things you study is exactly that, so that afterwards you can appreciate what the monks are doing and why they are living the style of life they're living in accordance with the Vinaya.
Very good. So we'll do our best to teach that here in Spanish.
Please, you know, because I think it's beneficial not only for the monastics, but also for lay people. And the lay people can help the monastics to keep their Vinaya.
Very good. It's not the most interesting subject for many people. You know, everybody goes after but I think it's vital if
well, if you have all the stories that go with it, if you, I mean, not just the Vinaya, but you have every rule has a story, right?
Yes.
And so if you include the stories, it gives you a wonderful picture of what life was like in India 2,500 years ago at the time of the Buddha. Personally, I think it's fascinating.
Organically.
Yeah, and you understand what that rule means, why that rule came into being, even if they made the story up later. I don't think they're all, you know, really exactly that. But every rule was made because someone complained.
Yes. about somebody else, usually.
About someone else, mostly lay people complaining about the monks, and something they saw them doing, and they said they shouldn't do that because it lowers faith in those who have faith and does not generate faith in those who do not have faith. And so a lot of the rules are just that, monks playing in water. So the king and queen think monks shouldn't frolic in the water. And so they complain to the Buddha. So we have a rule saying monks should not play in water, right? Not that ethically it makes any difference, right? You're not harming anybody or doing anything wrong. But if lay people see monks playing around and splashing each other in the water, they might lose faith. So therefore there's a rule. So it's very interesting, all these stories behind. It's the Vinaya isn't as boring as people might think.
Very good. And regarding what you just mentioned, what do you call it? How would you sum it up? People basically losing their faith in the Dharma because of some type of conduct they don't perceive as appropriate. So that's of course a sign that their faith is not well established. But as a monastic, without looking for it, we represent other monastics. We represent our tradition. We represent our teacher. We represent so much. So part of it is taking care of our conduct, so it's aligned with our practice, but part of it is protecting the minds of others, right?
Absolutely. So that was why the Vinaya was started. And I say again and again to our nuns, look, you might just think, oh, I'm just nobody special, I'm just me, but you are wearing the robe of the Buddha. And so therefore you represent the Buddha Dhamma Sangha. You represent the three jewels. And, I said last time we were dealing with Shantideva, when the Buddha, when he was a prince and he left the palace and he saw the old man, the sick man, and the corpse, and he was thrown into tumult about what to do about this. How can I deal with this? And then he saw the Shramana walking along very mindfully. And seeing that showed him the way. The door opened because he saw that. And I said to the nuns, if the monk had been wandering around, just slopping around and looking in the shops and giggling and laughing and hanging around, the Buddha would have not had faith at all. And maybe he would never have left the palace and become the Buddha. So we wouldn't be sitting here together. It was that link of seeing a perfect, well-disciplined monk walking along that gave the answer to the Buddha's perplexity about what to do next. That was what you do next. So I think it's very important because what to speak of bad behavior, but even just unmindful behavior can cause people to lose faith.
Yes. And please, Jitsuma, if you could share with my Dharma friends some advice about renunciation, about how to better understand the futility of samsara, how to develop this maturity where we relate with Dharma with a true interest, because that's so connected with monastic life.
Well, to my mind, renunciation, in English, it's a very heavy term.
Yes.
And it gives you the sense of, separating yourself from something to which you're terribly attached, but nonetheless, you have to do it. And that is not what it means. So sometimes I say it's like if you have a small child who has a teddy bear, then he loves his teddy very much. And if you take the teddy away from him, he'll be terribly, terribly upset because he's not ready to lose his teddy. But as he grows up, he becomes interested in other things. And his interest in the teddy bear is lost. So if you took teddy bear away, he wouldn't care because he's grown beyond it and he's not interested in that anymore. He's lost the interest. And with the loss of interest is the loss of the attachment to that. So the Buddha is always talking about ordinary people like us as the childish, right?
Yes.
And he's always talking about maturing, becoming minpa, right?
Yes.
We have to mature. We have to grow up. We have to become adults. And adults are interested in things which children are not interested in, right? So in that way, we grow up, we lose interest in many of the childish things, which, you know, very worldly minds grasp onto. It's not that you give up something you want. It's that you're so happy just to let it go because you don't want it anyway, right? And then you feel so much more light. Another example would be a tree in the spring and summer. Then if you pull the leaves, there's a lot of resistance. The tree doesn't want to lose its leaves. But come autumn, the leaves just fall. There's no attachment there. It's let go. The tree has let go now because it's matured into the autumn time. So it's like that, you know, that Dharma becomes so much more interesting, so much more fulfilling, so much more exciting that these other things simply are not there at all. I mean, you're just not interested anymore. I'm just thinking in my mind, one time when I was living in Lahul in this Himalayan valley in Tayugompa, and this young German man came up and asked if he could stay for 2 or 3 days in the monastery. So I said, okay, you could stay at my place. So I remember, I just see the scene. We were sitting up on the roof, the flat roof, earth roof, and all the mountains around. And he said, well, I can see doing this for a week or two, but then after that, don't you want to come back into the real world? And I said, what do you consider real world? And he thought, you know, cinemas and pubs and hanging out with his friends. And then he was naming all the things which he thought as being real. And I thought, not one of those things has the slightest attraction. I could care less. I'm not here in order to, you know, lead an austere life. I'm here because this is the most beautiful place I can think of. And all the people around me. And I said, you know, actually just living here in the monastery is not only real as far as, you know, what you're thinking of as real, but it's actually very interesting if you're living with these people in this community. It's never dull. And it's very fulfilling. I mean, I can't think of clean air, no traffic, beautiful views of the snow mountains, lovely, good, kind, honest people. You know, what do you think is real? Why is that less real than living in the middle of a choking city, right? Running around and spending all your day at your desk. In those days, they didn't have computers. Doing, you know, whatever to make more money, to buy more things which you don't really need anyway. Why is that considered more real? That's really an interesting question.
Very good. That's wonderful. It should be a natural process where we mature above and beyond.
Well, you're just not interested anymore in those things. You know, I mean, things which fascinate children are not necessarily very fascinating to adults. And that was the whole point. Is the Buddha was saying, grow up. You know, leave aside childish things.
And one interesting advice I got from one of my mentors, one of my Tibetan teachers, because I was a little bit hesitant of adopting all these vows. And then he said, well, you take the vows because you're going to break them. You're not perfect. They're a training ground, you know? So could you talk about that? Because some of my friends are a little bit scared. It's too much of a daunting task. I'm not perfect.
Well, again, that's very true. And even for the 5 precepts, usually if I give refuge, I give 5 precepts. And then people are terrified that maybe they'll squash an ant or something. And I say exactly what you were saying. You know, these are not commandments. You know, the Buddha's not up there with a thunderbolt about to smash you if you break a precept, but they're rules of training.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like a fence around the garden of the heart where we're trying to grow a Bodhi tree. You have to fence off so that the wild animals of all the kleshas of the negative emotions don't overtake us. And so one way of helping in that is to make sure that our conduct and our speech, at least, is ethical. I mean, all these rules are basically how to live in the world harmlessly and not cause any harm. And even though some of the rules in the monks' rules or nuns' rules of bhikshu, bhikshuni rules are a little bit antiquated and people don't use them anymore. Mm-hmm. But the basic formula is just how to live in the world in a way which harms the world and all the beings in it the very least. So that even if you're not doing anything to help, you're not harming. That's the first step. You know, you're conscious. We become more aware of the body and of our speech and the effect it has on others. So, these rules are exactly that. I mean, even in Thailand, which is super Vinaya conscious, I mean, the monks have travel permits, they can go on trains and buses for free. But in the Vinaya, it says you're not allowed to travel on any vehicle unless you're sick or really very, very old. But everybody's ignored that. I mean, that was for those days when only, aristocrats and rich people traveled in chariots or on horses. And so therefore a monk being, like a beggar really, should not, fancy himself by riding on a horse. But, getting on a bus doesn't mean that therefore you're acting like an aristocrat, right? I mean, the aristocrat would be in his Aston Martin. So, I mean, and so it's even in the most Vinaya conscious country, they have adapted. And they, there are certain rules which they just say, well, they're not valid today, so they're not important rules. And we should also remember, of course,
yes,
that just before the Buddha's Mahaparinirvana, he said to Ananda, look, we've just got too many rules. What the hell? When we started, we had almost nothing and we were so disciplined. Now we've got so many rules and everybody's breaking them. Just drop all the minor rules. Just keep the major rules. And Ananda said, oh, okay, yes, sadhu, sadhu, Bhagavan. And then, of course, he was asked,
some debate, no? What is minor? What is
minor? What is major? And he hadn't asked.
Yes.
So in order to be on the safe side, they said, let's keep them all. But it's obvious that the Buddha felt it was all getting out of hand. I mean, the nuns have 364 rules. We don't need that many. So, the Buddha understood the problem, but, whatever, at least up until the present day, the monastic Sangha has adhered to these rules, which is astonishing, really, when you think 2,600 years practically have gone by and they're still all following the same, monastic code.
That's wonderful.
Isn't it? Yes. Extraordinary.
Yes. Very good. And what other advice do you have for our Dharma friends who are considering monastic ordination? And even if we develop a program here, like a testing period and a training program, what do you think the ideal format should be for that?
I think that's a very good idea. And a lot of nowadays of monastic communities have done that you have even 1 or 2 years of being a trainee. And during that time, you keep, these 8 precepts and see how you get on. In many of them, they wear a different robe, like in the Thai forest tradition, they have to go around in white. Can you imagine in the West?
Or pink, white or pink, yes.
I mean, really. But, what can I say? I don't know how the Tibetans would do it, but I think to have, even here in our nunnery, when the girls first come, they stay for a few weeks without, just as laywood girls, they join everything, but they're just lay girls. Then they are asked if they really want to become nuns, and then they all say yes. Then they are shave their head, put on robes, and get 5 precepts, with the 3rd being celibacy, right? So Rabjum. And so then they are given a new Dharma name, and then they are part of the nunnery. And then usually after 1 or 2 years, often, when there's enough of them together, then they are given the Shramanarika, the Getsul rules. And then they can wear the yellow robe and do sojong. But it takes them at least a year and sometimes 2 years, if there's not enough of them together, before they take even the Getsul rules. So they're meantime joining in everything except sojong, but they haven't yet taken ordination. So I think to do it step by step by step is a good thing.
Very good. For me, it was also very helpful to go on pilgrimage and visit the holy sites of the Buddha, because from living in New Jersey or in United States, it all seemed like a legend, right? It all seemed, but when you're there, it all becomes more real. These are actual people that were very brave and took it upon themselves to change their lives in the world.
Oh, definitely. I mean, and the Buddha himself recommended pilgrimage to the 4 great places. I mean, before he died, right? He said you should all build stupas and visit those, at least those. And I think apart from Bodh Gaya, which of course is extraordinary, I love Shravasti.
Shravasti, I haven't visited Shravasti.
And now it's all built up a bit, as always happens. But when we visited and stayed there about 2 weeks, it was so simple that you really feel you could look up and see the Buddha and all his monks walking down the street, because it was just a very extraordinary feeling, and just the ruins of old monasteries there. There's some beautiful, I have to give credit to the Archaeological Department of India, that despite the fact they have very little funding, they have kept up all these sites very nicely. So they're like very nicely well organized parks, right, with grass, and then the ruins and notices saying what everything is, and the various monasteries around where people can stay. They have made it very nice. They don't have any room, any funding for further work, further excavation. I mean, they tell us they don't, and I'm sure they don't. But at least they maintain it very nicely, what is there. And definitely, it's a wonderful one, because also you meet other pilgrims. Right?
Yes.
I mean, it's like in Bodh Gaya, you meet from all the different Buddhist traditions, everybody, and they all come together doing their prayers and their ceremonies in their own way, and yet everybody respecting everybody and delighting in everybody. And it's a beautiful, beautiful feeling of the power of the Dharma. It's really a great blessing to go on pilgrimage.
And Jitsuma, you're also well known for the retreats you've undertaken in the Himalayas, in the mountains, and if you could share that a little bit of that experience in the sense of um, helping us understand the importance of doing retreats, a period of intensifying our practice, and how to relate with that. What is the learning curve for that? How to best prepare to engage in meditation retreats?
Well, I usually advise people who have visions of going off into the Himalayas for, you know, forever, to start from where we are and to undertake guided retreats with others, so that they understand what needs to be done and some of the obstacles which arise when we try to meditate, and they have someone to guide them and someone to answer their questions, and in general to gain a kind of confidence in their practice and their ability to deal with their outer and inner obstacles before they think about going off into solitude. And then in solitude, perhaps, you know, short solitudes, to begin with, a weekend or a week or a month, see how you go. And then extend it if you have the time. The important thing, I think, is to know very clearly what you want to do. You know, of course, obviously get your motivation together to realize you're doing this on behalf of all beings, but to be very clear about the method.
I see.
Because once you're there in retreat all by yourself and suddenly you realize you don't really know, should you do it more like this or should you do that? Or how long should you sit or shouldn't you sit? Or would this be better if I did this way? Or would it be better if I did that way? It's too late.
Yes.
You know, then your mind is just whirling around. So it's good to get all that under your belt before you start. Be very clear what you want to do, how you're going to do it, how you're going to set up your day and your night, and be structured as far as, you know, how long you
can... advantage to do guided retreats to help you go through that process.
Yeah, you know, I mean, if you do it with other people who've had much more experience first, then they can help, right? And they know, for example, how long you should sit each turn, each session, and so forth, you know. And so it's, if you are doing a tantric visualization like a ngundro or any practices, then I would advise taking a commentary with you.
Yes.
I mean, on the ngundro, there are many, many commentaries, and basically all ngundros are more or less the same within the, you know, differences of the actual text, but it's basically all the same. So you can take a few, you know, and or at least one that you really trust and like, and study it and really think about it, you know. And also for any other tantric practice you're doing, take a commentary on it. So you can, this is your time, you have endless time now. You can sit and you can read and you can think, and then you can practice. And so it integrates the whole point of a retreat is that there is little outer distraction. There may be a lot of inner distraction, but now you have the opportunity to start dealing with your inner distractions because you don't have many outer distractions. And then you can merge your whole consciousness with the practice. Nothing is disturbing that anymore. And so this is why it's very fulfilling to do periods of retreat. It doesn't have to be vastly long, but it should be intense in the sense that you're completely giving yourself to it, not intense in the sense of getting all tense stuff. And you know, and I would also say, despite the Tibetan tradition, that don't fixate on numbers.
Yes, we get too obsessed with numbers.
They all get obsessed with numbers. The commentaries themselves say numbers are not important. I'm not making this up. This is not Tenzin Palmo. This is the commentaries. They are saying, don't worry about numbers. If you are focused, then very quickly the experiences will come. If you are not focused, if you're distracted, then you can recite for 100,000 eons and you'll never get any results. So the point is not the number. The important thing is how much we merge our mind with the practice and become the practice. Then, even a few mantras will bring results. So that's the important thing, is how well we completely try to merge our body, speech, and mind with the practice and become one with the practice. So the practice is not just up here and blah, 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 but really goes down into the heart.
Very good. And you mentioned in this context of talking about the retreat, how important it is to develop our confidence, our ability to overcome obstacles. And that touches upon a very important subject. Many people, many Dharma friends ask me about this. They have low self-esteem and, they don't think they will be able to improve or correct some of their habits and so forth. And if we don't have enough self-care or self-worth, then we invent all types of methods to compensate, and pride and seek recognition from others. So could you give us some advice of how to develop more confidence on the path, our ability to improve and make progress?
Well, I think the important thing first is to remember that we all have Buddha nature. That the worthless, useless thing we're identifying with is not really us, right? It's the clouds in the sky, but it's not the sky. And since we all have Buddha nature, we all have Buddha potential, right? We all have the potential to wake up. And it doesn't mean it's going to be over there, a million miles in the future. It could happen in a moment. Many people have woken up. Maybe they go back to sleep, but they woke up for a moment and then they understood their enormous potential. So that even if the ego then takes over, and covers up and says, oh, now I'm nearly enlightened. There's something deeper inside us which understands that that is how it is. And so then, then from that we can develop the ability to begin to see more and more clearly the true nature of the mind, which isn't all the things we think it is. Even Shantideva said that while pride and arrogance are klesha, they're mental afflictions, but confidence is essential on the path. If we want to go from here to here, if we don't believe we're going to get there, then we'll never even start. And so from a Buddhist psychological point of view, it's considered laziness. One of the forms of laziness is low self-esteem. Because we tell ourselves we can't do it. I'm useless. I've never gotten, I don't know how to meditate. I just have too many thoughts. Other people go into instant samadhi. Me, I can do it. I know I won't be able to do it. I'll never be able to finish this. I'll never be able to do that. Then we don't try. Yes. And we think it's humility, but it's not humility. It's laziness. Anybody can change. Anybody can accomplish if they put effort. But we all have to make some effort. I know it's nice and fashionable to talk about being effortless, but I always say it takes a lot of effort to become effortless.
That's a good quote. Very good.
Really, in any skill, yes, at a certain point it becomes effortless, but how many hours, days, months, years have been spent honing that skill until it is indeed spontaneous. So, with the mind the same, we have to work at it, and Don't give up, because we know that the true nature of the mind is completely beautiful and perfect, and it's who we really are. And if we try to do too much all at once, it might be that's too difficult. So do small things at start. Don't start by thinking you have to sit for 2 hours. Even 10 minutes is better than 2 hours of total distraction and despair. Anybody can sit for 10 minutes, then 20 minutes, half an hour, 40 minutes, slowly. And sometimes the mind is wild. I mean, even at the time of the Buddha, when life was so much more quiet, he described our mind either as a mad monkey or as a drunken elephant in rut, right? So that was in his day. Things haven't changed, but nonetheless, he still said, you can do it. And people did, and have done it all the way through until the present day. So, don't discuss, listen to the word, listen to what we're telling ourselves, and say, would I say this? Oh, you're useless. Oh, you're never going to do it. Oh, you're hopeless. Look, you've got too many thoughts. Just don't bother. Would we say like that to our best friend? If we talk like that to our best friend, we wouldn't have friends. We would encourage them, right? So why do we speak better to our friends than we speak to ourselves? Make friends with ourselves and encourage ourselves and set ourselves small targets that we can accomplish, and then extend that slowly. And when we fall down, we stand up again.
Very good. That's wonderful advice. Thank you so much, Jitsuma. We'll do our best to put
Well,
this
we've all
into
gone
practice.
through it, really, Lama, we have all gone through it. And it's the fact is that even the Buddha, I'm sure, had his off days before he became a Buddha.
Yes.
And, because we're human beings. But as human beings, we also have this incredible potential, which is lying there waiting simply to be recognized. It's not that we have to create it, we just have to see it.
Very good. And it's wonderful to have so many good examples, beginning with the Buddha, but even contemporary teachers like yourself, His Holiness Dalai Lama. Sometimes we have some false praise that makes them special, like if they descended from heaven with wings, but they're actually
They're people.
just courageous people that
Well,
lifted themselves up.
I think that many of the great lamas that you met, one of the lamas I'm especially fond of is a lama who lives in Kham, and he's the head of a large nunnery where all the nuns sit in meditation boxes and never lie down, 350 of them.
Yeah, I heard wonderful things. Very good.
And one of the things I love about him, apart from his great laugh, is that he has all these wonderful stories of when he was training as a young monk, and all the things he went through and all his doubts. He was very skeptical as a young monk, and all his doubts and all his problems and all his confrontations with teachers and whatever like this, until finally he got it, and once he got it, just a glimpse, then he understood that what they were talking about wasn't just nonsense. It really was true. It's true. And it was there within him too, that he's not just something you read about in books or debate, but something which is the very most essential meaning of our life, is to wake up. And wake up to what? Wake up to our true nature.
Very good. Well, that's a wonderful statement to end with. Thank you so much, Jasuma, for your time, for your teachings, for your experience. We look forward to seeing you again and in a little bit different format and questions and answers about Lojon and mind training.
Thank you,
Thank,
Lama Rinchen. Thank you for your questions. Very beautiful and lovely to see everybody here. Hello.
yes. It's not the best time for Europe or our Dharma friends in Latin America, but we'll make this video available to many others in a short time. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
To the tip. Bye bye. And best wishes.